the Mets here. For all your Mets here, let's go. Bring it home. Bring it home. Bring it home Make it happen. There's no stopping us now. We're gonna do it again. It's not a question of how. It's just a matter. It's just a matter. It's just a matter of when.
Hello again, everybody. Joe Piscopo, Shea Stadium. The big story. Mets 86. Exciting, thrilling, awesome. Let's take a look.
Do it. Do it. We got the teamwork to make the dream work. We got the teamwork to make the dream work. We got the teamwork to make the dream work. Ooh, we got the teamwork to make the dream work. We're gonna make it this time. We're gonna take it home. What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talking Mets here, Rob, with another Mets Hot Stove Live, the last day of January. And we know what February brings. It brings Super Bowl and the thing we care about most, baseball. Spring training is on the horizon. Ladies and gentlemen, it is getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers, position players reporting, and spring training games, so we can put the offseason behind us. We can put the additions, the subtractions all behind us, and we can focus on the roster that is currently in spring training and who would make the team, who is not going to make the team, surprises in spring training, everything that we talk about in regards to spring training and the anticipation of opening day on March 30th, where the Mets will play the Miami Marlins in Miami for opening day to start a 7-game road trip to start the season. 4 games in Miami and 3 games in Milwaukee before the Mets finally return back to Citi Field for their home opener in the first week in April. So we are all over the news, the rumors, all the stuff that's been going around with the Mets, the lack of interest in Andrew Chafin, the somewhat interest in Zach Britton, and also today, Jeff McNeil was officially extended by the Mets. He had his introduction today. The 4-year deal that can be a 50-year option, 4 years, $50 million is the deal, and a possibility of a 50-year option with a $2 million buyout if they don't take that team option. If you just missed the video about the Pete Alonso extension and how close can it be, and we talked about a couple of proposals that I think the Mets could offer Pete Alonso and what Pete Alonso might counter put a counter offer in saying, this is what I'm looking for. What can you do? It's all in that video that just went that just premiered about 20 minutes ago or so. If you missed it, check it out. It's about a 10-minute video, not very long, but it gives an interesting perspective on what can be considered a fair deal for the team and a pretty fair deal for the player. And again, when it comes down to extensions, when it's a player currently on your team and you have years of arbitration you can buy out, the team usually saves money in that aspect. I brought up the situation with Aaron Judge and the Yankees, where the Yankees made a mistake in not extending Aaron Judge when they had arbitration years left available, where they probably could have saved $50-60 million in a contract, and they didn't. And this is where the Mets cannot go wrong in this situation, because if they want to keep this contract and this extension of a contract under $300 million, they need to get this extension done. Because if they don't, they're going to end up like the Yankees did, with their hands tied behind their back, and they got to fight with other clubs to retain Pete Alonso. And if you notice what Cohen is doing, right? The McNeil deal is a little bit easier to figure out. And I already said earlier that Alonso deal is going to be a little bit more complicated because it's a lot more money. It's a lot more deals. I already put that in the video that it's guaranteed going to be over $200 million, 110%. I don't think it's going to hit the $300 million threshold because of the fact it's an extension. It's not somebody that is currently on the open free agent market where you're going to have to probably pay a little bit more just to retain him, which doesn't make sense for the Mets. And I don't think the Mets are going to let that happen. So that's where we are when it comes to Pete Alonso, considering the fact that what we talked about right when the offseason or the season ended and the offseason started was the Mets need to extend Jeff McNeil and extend Pete Alonso. And I think they're going to do that. And I go into detail that I won't go into here live into the video about why the Mets should extend Pete Alonso, not because he can be one of our franchise players. That's one of the reasons, but there's other reasons that could be involved in why you got to do it now and why it makes sense for the long haul, especially when next offseason is going to be a big spending offseason for the New York Mets. If you're hearing all the rumors, all you hear is about Ohtani. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you hear a lot about, Ohtani's probably 100% the Mets are going to go after. And that's a guarantee. But if you go deeper into the rumors and listening to what the San Diego media is talking about, even some Baltimore media that is talking about, and stories and stuff like that, and rumors that are associated with Buck Showalter and Manny Machado, there is a lot of speculation that the Mets are going to go after Machado as well. So I think that's not much of it shouldn't be much of a shock, because what happened this year with Cohen and Correa, I think, was a huge way to piss Steve Cohen off, even though he had something to do with that situation with Correa. It's very interesting to see what Cohen's going to do. And again, if Cohen's going to spend $7 million on a Super Bowl commercial in regards to the Mets, money is no object. So as long as it's smart money, Cohen's going to do it. And that's something that we're going to be looking at for sure. So with that said, let's say what up to everybody before we get a little further into the Mets Hot Stove Live for the hour show. Joe, what's up? We got Karen, we got Optimus, Sean, a member of Talking Mets and Rob. We got David. We have we got Victor. We got another David. We got Explosive. We got Grant, a member of Talking Mets and Rob. What is up, everybody? If you're new to the channel, say what's up. Do not be shy, guys. Welcome to the channel. If you're just hanging out, not saying anything, don't be shy. If you got questions, please ask them. This is why I'm here to at least try to answer your questions, or somebody will be in the comment in the chat that might be able to answer it if I can't. Carl, how you doing, buddy? So remember, guys, when it comes down to extensions, I want to make this clear. If Jeff McNeil became a free agent when he was going to be a free agent, what was it, in 2 years from now or a year from now, Jeff McNeil would probably get about a 5-year deal, probably around $70+ million. So that's why this extension is probably a little bit team friendly. If you really think about it, because of the fact that there is a possible, that's the way extensions work, right? You don't see teams extend players and overpay for the player they currently have on their team. You're buying out arbitration years. So it's a that's why you have to look at it that way. And people that think it's going to be 300 or more is probably not going to be the case. The reason why the Aaron Judge got over $300 million, well over $300 million, was because he was on the open free agent market where other teams can bid. And if you really look at it, it took to the last minute, the last hour, for the Yankees to finally go above and beyond to get Aaron Judge. And that's something that is what the Mets have to avoid when it comes to Pete Alonso. You do not want to do that. And I said it in the video. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. That the fact that with the Aaron Judge, with the Pete Alonso situation, you don't want to get into a scenario where you have to bid, because there's always going to be one team, just like there was with Aaron Judge, right? The Padres was rumored to offer $400 million, and he didn't take that because he wanted to be a Yankee. And you don't want to have a situation where a team is going to outbid you to the point where, just because Cohen has all the money in the world doesn't mean he's going to give Pete Alonso a $400 million contract when you could have got him for 9 years, $275, and you spent $100 million more because you were stupid enough to let him go to free agency. Now, if the Mets give him many offers and Pete Alonso's not willing to sign it, and he takes himself to free agency, then, the Mets are like, all right, we tried what we could have done prior to him being a free agent. Now we have to probably overspend for him, right? The Mets, I think there was like 1 or 2 times when the Mets went to Brandon Nimmo and tried to extend him, but because Brandon Nimmo was in a situation where he was changing agents, when Boris became his agent, we know damn well that there wasn't a chance that Brandon Nimmo was going to take an extension. He was going to free agency, and it paid off for him. And the Mets know that. I'm not sure who Pete Alonso's agent is, but it's not Scott Boras. So it might be at some point. You never know. But at the moment, I do expect the Mets to offer a deal probably right when spring training is about to start to Pete Alonso, and they'll obviously talk during spring training. If a deal gets done, who knows? But I think it's going to be less than 10 years, and I think it's going to be less than $300 million, because the Mets are not going to give a 10-year, $300+ million deal when they are buying out arbitration years that they don't have to do. And that's why players take a little bit less from a team they're currently on, because they are buying out arbitration years that if they were getting $15 million for the next 2 years in arbitration or a little bit more, they guarantee them getting more because you're buying out those arbitration years. And, we'll see. I don't think Pete Alonso is going to take anything less than $25 million per year, nor should he. And that's something that is very interesting. You see, D. Garcia, I know it was brought up a lot about the 8 years, $200 million. But if you really look at it, $200 million divided by 8 is $25 million per year. I think that's too low for Pete Alonso, for a guy that consistently hits 35 home runs plus. And, if he has a really good year, he can hit 40 and above. So, and if you notice last year, his average went up. He was more of a better hitter. He wasn't just a guy that hits for power and bats 230. If he can hit for average, like around 272, 265, 270, and hit 35 plus home runs and knocking 100 RBIs, if you look at the numbers around the league that has those stats, he should be making at least $30 million a year. So that is something that the Mets, I think, are going to really look at when it comes to Pete Alonso. Look, the Mets are not going to lowball Pete Alonso, but they also have to make sure that the Mets buying out arbitration years, it's kind of like a handshake, like, hey, listen, if you're a free agent on the market, of course you're going to get more, but because you're still our property, and we still got 2 years of arbitration, we can just sit down with our hands crossed and let you get $15 million per year or $60 million per year in arbitration, and we won't even come to the table. The Mets are going to come to the table knowing that they're going to get a little bit of a discount. I'm not saying they're going to get $100 million discount, but if they get anywhere between $50 to $75 million discount in total contract, then they probably will do it. And I said that in the video, and I give proposals in that video that you can actually check out as well. Well, Home Slice, it's not about the position, because let's be honest, is center field a real prime position? I mean, look around Major League Baseball. How many really good center fielders are there? Center field used to be the spot. Used to be one of the prime positions, right? Shortstop used to be one of the prime positions. It's really not anymore. You don't see a lot of the shortstop as the big power hitters anymore. Now you see it as the third basemen that are the power hitters. The right fielders are the power hitters. And now certain first basemen are the power hitters. There's not a really premium position anymore, right? The catcher position used to be, great all around the league. Now it's a joke. Like, there's not a lot of prime positions. It's not about the prime position. It all comes down to offensive stats. That's all it comes down to now with contracts. You if you're a decent fielder, a defensive player, and you're great offensively, you're going to get a huge contract. It's just the way it is nowadays. And, Pete Alonso is a 260, 270 hitter who hits 35 plus home runs a year. And on a really good year can hit 40 home runs. And you can almost put it to the bank that Pete Alonso is going to have 100 RBIs almost every year. So, if you look at his stats and put him against guys that are making $300 million, well, guess what? He's going to get around that, and he's going to be making around $30 million per year. So that's something that you always have to look at. You can't just look at the prime position. That really doesn't matter in baseball anymore. Are you a good player? Everybody looks at their offensive stats. As long as you're not a butcher in that defensive metric, then, you're going to make a ton of money. Because let's be honest, everybody's looking at the offensive stats. You don't see people looking at stats, when they're a free agent and talk about their defensive capabilities only, because defensive players are not getting what powerful offensive players are getting that are putting up crazy numbers. So just because Pete Alonso is a first baseman doesn't mean he should get what other first basemen get. He's considerably better than 95% of the first basemen in baseball. He's going to get paid like a premier player. Now, can you put Alonso into that superstar level? I think he's bordering it. He's a star, no doubt, but a superstar. I think he can get better than what he already is. I'm not saying, more home runs. I'm talking about more RBIs and a little bit more average. He could probably get like that. Is he a superstar? I think a lot of us would say yes, but he is a star of the league. Find me more guys that put up better offensive numbers than Pete Alonso. And I agree, Ken. I think Pete Alonso, when he first came up, he had issues, absolutely. But, he's one of them few guys that actually worked on his game. If you remember in the All-Star game, he was working with Ron Washington defensively when he should be enjoying being an All-Star. He is that type of person that always strives to get better. And I think sometimes at fault, which is not really Pete Alonso's fault, except that he's just a hard worker, is that sometimes he gets into his mind a little too much when it comes to working too hard on certain things. And I think it hurts him a little bit, but I can never kill a guy for always trying, because that's the most important thing that I think that you can have from a player. And he's a good guy. He's a good teammate. He's a really good to great player. And I do think, that's the problem, Optimist. I don't think he's going to take $25 million per year. I don't think it's average annual value. I think AAV has to be aligned with the best players, offensive players in the game. The where it's going to be a little complicated is the years. Is going to be the hard part of working his contract out. Because I think AAV, he has to get. No, Pete Alonso is better than Matt Olson. I'm sorry. He's much better offensive player than Matt Olson. Matt Olson isn't a very good average hitter. Pete Alonso is. I think Olson, defensively, I think Olson's better, obviously, but it's not like Pete Alonso is, he's maybe in that next lower tier, but I don't think, I don't just see as a first baseman. Oh yeah, Pete is better than Olson. Yeah. I mean Olson's a really good player, but Pete Alonso is a star. Well, that's the thing. Olson was a steal, but you see, that's why you have to look into what the Braves do sometimes when it comes to contracts. When you have a guy on your team and you try to extend them, and that's why the Braves do that. The Braves know they're not going to outspend these other teams when they get their free agents on the market. That's why they try to sign them. That's why when they went to Dansby Swanson to try to extend him, he wasn't going to do it because they were going to lowball him, which the Atlanta Braves always do. They put these young kids that have many years left of control, against the wall, and they have nowhere to go. So when they see $100 million contract for 7 years or 6 years, they're going to take it because it's $100 million contract. When they actually, if they get these guys to close to free agency, they usually don't sign because they know the Braves aren't going to give them that big contract. That's why, it's not like the Braves didn't want Swanson. They knew they weren't going to be able to pay Swanson. That's why they didn't do it. So, for the Brave fans that are giving them all the credit in the world for letting Swanson go, they weren't paying that amount that was that Swanson got. So, and that's why when they traded for Olson, the signing was done in a week? Because of the fact that Olson knew he got a couple of years more control. And when he sees a massive contract like that, over $100 million, of course you're going to take it because the next day you get into the field, you can break your ankle and you might not ever be the same player. You never see that big contract. The Braves are smart in doing that. And, so other teams have to learn with certain players. You have to do it. Like, if this guy is going to be good, like we all had a pretty good feeling that Pete Alonso was going to be big, was going to be really damn good. Now, I didn't know he was going to be this good offensively. When he was batting like 240, it scared me a little bit. Like, all right, we got a power hitter that's going to hit, under 250. That concerns me. But Pete Alonso gradually got better average-wise. He's been working the counts a little bit more. He got a better eye. He worked better with his defense. And he just became a better hitter and better overall player. Those are the type of players that I love. That's why Jeff McNeil is deserving of this contract, because when things were going bad for him, when the whole chemistry around the team and the way the team was structured, where they wanted everybody to hit home runs, it hurt Jeff McNeil's numbers because Jeff McNeil is not a power hitter. But kudos to Jeff McNeil realizing that he is an average guy. He can be a dominant player as an average guy that is a batting champion that might not have a lot of RBIs, won't hit a lot of home runs, but you know what he would do? He puts the bat on the ball, makes the defense work. Jeff McNeil is going to be even better without the shift this year, and it's a big deal that Jeff McNeil is so perfect for this team because of the fact that you can bat him leadoff, you can bat him second, you can bat him ninth, you can bat him seventh, fifth. It doesn't matter. This guy is just a walking hit machine. And when Jeff McNeil is a really good player, and why every team that ever asked for a trade with the Mets wanted Jeff McNeil, is because Jeff McNeil is the guy that you want on his team. He goes 100 miles an hour every single time. He can play right field, left field, third base, second base. I wouldn't be shocked this guy could play shortstop if you really needed him to. It's perfect for that, for Jeff McNeil. It's a nice contract. It's a team-friendly contract, and you got him for at least 4 years, possibly 5. So with the Alonso thing and the contract, extending him basically completes your core that you gave contracts to. McNeil, Alonso, Nimmo, and I put Lindor in that mix because he has a big contract as well. And then if you got those core 4 players, and then the possibility of adding Beatty and Alvarez if it's this year or next year, you can have an infield of Beatty, Lindor, McNeil, Alonso, and Alvarez for at the very least the next 4 to 5 years. And if McNeil sticks around, you can have him for 6, 7 more years as a core, along with Brandon Nimmo, along with whoever else that the Mets might sign. It's a core that the Mets, let's be honest, the Mets haven't had a couple of guys, position player wise, that, maybe 2 guys, the last core guys was Reyes and Wright. That was actually homegrown. And, that was one of the better couple of years for the Mets in that era. And, for people who always talked about the Mets farm system is bad, it's not that good, yet look around the league and look at all the Mets players that even if they weren't on the Mets and the Mets got rid of them, and the Mets DFA'd them or traded them. I mean, look at Justin Turner. Look at, there's so many guys that you can look at and be like, wow, look at Travis d'Arnaud with the Braves. There's so many players around the league that are a good player or a really good player, and guys that that are not on the team anymore. I mean, the Mets had another generation K with their rotation. It didn't last long, but everybody thought this rotation was going to be around for 10 years. They're scattered around the league. They're still major leaguers. Besides Harvey, everybody else is still major leaguers. And a lot of them got contracts and got big contracts. Look at DeGrom. So I do expect a lot of credit to certain people in the front office, because as much as we killed Sandy Alderson for years, these are all his homegrown guys, right? These are guys he drafted. So a lot of these guys are who he drafted, and that the names that I just spoke about. So, we kill Sandy Alderson for never doing anything with sign-ins and a lot of big trades. He wasn't good at that, but he was good at picking guys in the draft, in the Rule 5 in international. He's done a very good job with that. And then the Mets are looking to do that again. Again, they had the number 1 draft class last year. And that evolves around Jet Williams and Kevin Parada. So, and that already shows you how much better the scouting and people that are dealing with college players and international players, that the money from Steve Cohen and putting it into that area of the team in the scouting, in college scouting, international scouting, is already paying off. And it only took a couple of years of Cohen taking it over and putting money into where it's needed to have the number 1 draft class last year. It's a huge deal, and it's important to realize that it's not always about trading your prospects or signing big players. You can do all of that, but if you don't have even one, at least 2 guys that are homegrown, it's very hard to win. Because as much as we joke about buying championships, and that was like a big deal with the Yankees and everything like that. Look at the years the Yankees spent a ton of money. They never won. When they actually won and they were consistently winning, it was around their core 4 and getting supplemental pieces around their core 4, right? Paul O'Neill wasn't homegrown. Tina Martinez wasn't homegrown. David Justice wasn't homegrown, right? There's so many guys that weren't homegrown, but they were pieces to put around the core 4 of the Yankees that made it a dynasty that it's very unlikely to happen ever again. And if it does, it would be amazing. Who that would be, you never know. We all wish for our team that it could happen, but that's very much wishful thinking. I mean, the closest thing you have to a dynasty is the Astros, and that's like what? Barely? It's not even a dynasty. They won 2 world championships in 5 years, which is pretty damn good if, considering coming from a Mets fan. that hasn't won anything in almost 40 years. So there's a lot to look at when it comes to that. So, and I like what Ken said, that it says this is a hell of a team. It really is. I know people are gonna kill it. There's a lot of people killing this team that they didn't do enough, and I think a lot of us can agree with that they could have got that one other bat. But this team is, this is the same team that scored 4.75 runs per game last year. That is more than enough to win any game, considering the fact that the starting rotation, it doesn't have to be great. It can be in a little better than middle of the pack. And the bullpen should be very damn good. That should help you win a lot more ball games, especially early on, that we talked about time and time again. It's a broken record when it comes to this. If you go back to April and May, I know a lot of people don't like to do it, but you know what? If you're bored around the house one day, you're not doing nothing, you're home from work or whatever you're doing, right? Take a look at the stats or the game day stats, and just look through it. Look at the pitchers. Look at the games the Mets lost in April and May. It wasn't a lot of games they lost, but it catches up to you later on in the season. The Mets lost a lot of games early on. Remember, in April, even though Edwin Diaz was dominant all year, in April he struggled, and most of the bullpen struggled. The Mets bullpen lost a few games, a handful of games in April and May. That, let's be honest, in the end of September, you're not talking about April and May. You were talking about the games in September, but there was people in the chat early on in the season that saying that early games in April and May don't matter. Of course they do, because they can bite you in the ass in September. And this is what it did. We only talk about the Braves series and the month of September with the teams that under 500 that the Mets didn't do well. But if they would have played a little bit better in April and won maybe 3 or 4 more games, those September games would have been irrelevant. That Braves series would have been irrelevant. And that's where people have to put their minds, and why April and May are so important. When everybody is strong, when everybody's healthy, when everybody is fresh, win those games in April and May. The Mets have a tough schedule. Like, I'm going to pull it up right now. Let me just look at it really quickly. Let me just bring it up. There we go. I mean, I was looking at it earlier, and the Mets they don't have an easy schedule. Like, not at all. Hold on. Sorry, guys. All right. So we're going to look at it, of course. Alrighty. These stupid schedules. All right. Here we go. All right. So the first half of the season, right? We got Miami. This is in end of March, April. Miami, Milwaukee, Miami, San Diego, Oakland. We got a very early West Coast trip in April. We go to Oakland, LA, Dodgers, and Giants on 6, 7, 8. On a 10-game road trip in the first month of the season. We got a 10-game West Coast trip for the Dodgers, Oakland, and San Francisco. Now, Oakland is not going to be a very good team. San Francisco can be okay, and the Dodgers are a pretty damn good team. So we got a 10 after we come home. So we start the season on a 7-game road trip, Miami and Milwaukee. Then we come home for 6 games to play Miami and San Diego. Not easy. Right? And then we go on the West Coast trip for 10 days. And then we come back, we play Washington and Atlanta at home to end April. And then we it's a little bit easier. We got Detroit, Colorado, Cincinnati, Washington, Tampa, and Cleveland, the Cubs, more Colorado, and Philadelphia. That is the month of May. So April is going to be tough. May could be a little bit easier. But you see, April is a very tough month. But we get that West Coast trip out of the way early, which is interesting. But the Mets seem to always get that West Coast trip in like June. This year, it's very, very early April. So, and, even going out of the stretch, it's not easy to start the season 7 games on the road. Even though Miami is going to be, Citi Field South, and there's going to be a ton of Met fans there. I'll be there on opening day with the 7 line, and there'll be other Met fans there. The 7 line has 2,000 people rolling deep, and that's just the 7 line. And you can imagine all the people that already live down there that are going to go to the game as well. So you're going to probably have about close to, I guarantee you, we'll probably see between 6,000 to 10,000 Met fans there easily. But exactly, home slice. And if you look at Miami, we know how good their pitching staff is. Their rotation is really damn good, but their lineup is actually decent. It's pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. And they will be pesky. They're always a pain in the ass. And it is very interesting that the Mets. This balanced schedule is already weird for the Mets starting in April, right? Like I said, 7 games on the road to start the season. Then we come home for 6, and then we go on a 10-game West Coast trip. That basically ends the month of April. So, it's going to suck. It's not going to be fun. We're on the road a lot in April. But that actually is good, because if you look at the end of the year, we're home a ton. And that's something that can always help us as well. So, I think somebody said something. What is it? Oh, Richard loved the show. Get us another hitter since we lost his name to Minnesota. Oh yeah, I don't think we're gonna get another hitter right now. Again, the Mets are, they're bolstering up their bullpen. Their bullpen should be considerably better than last year, especially early on. I think this rotation, if the rotation remains healthy, it should be very good. And I expect Verlander to have 30 starts this year. I said this yesterday in the stream. If Verlander has 30 starts, there's no reason why this team shouldn't have a really good year, right? I think Scherzer is going to be more healthier than people think, because, again, if you look at last year, he started the season where he wasn't available on opening day. McGill had to start on opening day. He already knew coming back he had to be the guy, because he was all by his damn self, because DeGrom decided to take the first half because of injury. And I think Scherzer, first year in New York, not with DeGrom, it put all the pressure on him. And I think he tried to go out there every 5th day early on and try to pitch 9 innings every single time. And I think he wore himself out. And I don't think he needs to do that. I think he can be 85% of himself healthy, and he can probably be one of the top 10 pitchers in baseball. And it's good enough, considering the fact that this guy can probably still pitch to a 2.7 ERA and be one of the best pitchers, best couple of pitchers in baseball. And that's what I think he can be still. Yeah, and people act like, just because Verlander is 40, and I get the age, you're always concerned about that. But it was only last year that he won the Cy Young. I know it was in a lower American league that wasn't very good, but when you pitch to an under 2 ERA, and you face in major league lineups, that's not easy to do. And even if, again, I'm not looking at Verlander and saying, all right, you gotta pitch under a 2 ERA, or it's a waste of money. I don't think so. I think if you get anything under a 3 ERA from your number 2 starter, and you get from Scherzer, you get an under 3 ERA, I think you're rolling. You always want your number 1 and number 2 to have an under 3 ERA, and it's very rare that happens. So if you have an under 3 ERA, I think the Mets will be rolling. And you know what? I expect Senga that go through a little bumps in the road. But you know what? There shouldn't be any bumps. There shouldn't be any concern if Senga has a couple of bumps in the road, because Ohtani did, Darvish did. The big pitchers in baseball that came from Japan struggled early on. They got to get accustomed to the league. They got to get accustomed to every 5th day. Once they figure it out, the stuff is natural. Senga's stuff, not just from the Mets front office, from other MLB execs, that with this ghost forkball and all that crazy stuff that he throws, it puts a lot of players off balance. And then he throws 96 miles, 97 miles an hour, which, is something that is not rare anymore. But when you got these different off-speed pitches that keeps hitters off balance, I think when he realizes that his stuff is really good and it works in Major League Baseball, I think that's something that you got to really be worried about from other teams. And, nobody's talking about Jose Quintana, who is another Bulldog, a guy that I'm not looking for a guy to have a year like he had last year, ERA-wise. I need a guy like Jose Quintana to take the ball every fifth day and give us innings, protect our bullpen. You want your fourth starter to pitch the innings. He's the workhorse of your rotation. He's got to throw those innings. He's got to be the Bulldog. He's got to work those innings. If you need him to throw that extra inning, you leave him out there. I'm not expecting him to have a 3.5 ERA. If you have an under a 4 ERA as my fourth starter, as long as you throw the innings that we expect from you, save the bullpen a little bit, because you're going to need that bullpen later on in the season. Or excuse me, the rotation later in the season, and that's why you should use your bullpen early on. So, and Ken, that's a good comment actually about McCann, Davis, Escobar will be better. I agree. I think Escobar tried too hard, just like Scherzer did. I think Escobar felt like there was a lot of pressure on him. He was the protection behind Pete Alonso. Even with a bad year from Escobar, he still hit 20 home runs. I would like the average to be, closer to 250, which I think he can do. But he was the guy that was supposed to protect Pete Alonso, and I wouldn't be shocked if Buck Showalter right off the bat on opening day puts Escobar to protect Pete Alonso once again, because you always give that veteran that chance. And I think Escobar is a good enough player. He's not old, because you saw what he did in September. You would think an older player would be worse in September and not in June. So we'll see when it comes to that. Well, explosive, you could say they didn't do enough, but we don't really know, right? Again, how many more runs per game do you want? This lineup produced 4.75 runs per game last year. Like, if you can't win with a 4.75 runs per game, then don't even play the season. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can win that way. You got to remember, in the month of September, they dropped the full run. You can name many reasons for that. Marte out of the lineup was a huge deal that nobody likes to talk about. The pitchers weren't pitching as well as they were. The rotation wasn't pitching as well as they did all year. In September, there was a lot of factors into that. So, I think if that lineup was healthy with Marte, I think you would have seen, an average of 4.5 runs per game still. But there's a lot to look at when it comes to what happened with that. And you got to remember, we're looking at DH, third base, and catcher. That was a complete no-show for almost the entire season. DH and catcher, we got nothing all year. All year. And then Escobar at the end of the year turned it on in September. If you get one or two of those that actually show up and actually show they can play baseball, this lineup can be even better than what it was last year. And, everybody just looks at a lineup and says, oh, look at the power of that lineup. Well, let me know about the strikeouts too, because that's another huge deal as well. Well, explosive, they beat us one more game in the series. That's it. You know what I'm saying? The Padres were really good, but they also got exposed in the playoffs as well. Right? Everybody considers the Phillies last year as a team that was worse than the Braves and the Mets, yet the Padres struggled against the Phillies. So, as good as the Padres look, they are just as much of a choke job as the Mets were in many years in a row, and they were considered a better team than the Mets overall. Right? They were non-existent in their division. Yeah, Richard, it was 4.75 runs per game. Now, it dropped off in the month of September where it was a full run difference. But again, that was no Marte. That was a huge difference in that lineup. You saw the difference it made in the month of September. And, Marte was one of the spark plugs to this team all year. Every time you needed somebody to come through, it seemed like Marte came through every single time. So, yeah, Famous, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, exactly, Optimus. That's why when people are like, oh, we're not better than the Phillies and not better than the Braves. Well, okay, let's do what the Phillies did. If we're the third wild card team, are you going to bitch and moan about it, or are you going to be happy you made the playoffs? And guess what? The New York Mets could go on a run just like the Phillies did, just like the Braves did with 87 wins, just like the Nationals did in 2019. You have to get hot at the right time. That's it. That's all it is now in the playoffs, because the best team seems to not always win anymore, right? Houston, they had easy roads in the American League, right? They were easily winning that division in the West. The playoffs wasn't really that much of a concern. They played the Yankees. The Yankees weren't even no contest for them. So they didn't have really that much competition, right? And then when they got to face the Phillies got exposed by a way better team. You saw exactly what the Phillies were all year. They got exposed in that series. They got exposed. They struck out a ton. When they didn't hit home runs, their offense was non-existent. And that's something that, you look at, and then look, teams get exposed. The Braves got exposed by the Phillies when the Brave fans always thought they were better than everybody else in the world, when the Braves struggled against the Phillies the entire year, and it showed up in the playoffs, right? The Mets and Padres, you didn't play each other a lot, so you can't really say who had whose number. But clearly the Padres, it came down to the pitching, right? The pitching showed up for the Padres. The pitching didn't show up for the Mets. That was it. That was the series right there, right? It was each team blew out the other team when that team won, right? When the Mets won game 2, they blew out the Padres. When the Padres won, they blew out the Mets game 1 and game 3. It wasn't any close games. So that's where you have to look at it when it comes to the playoffs and everything like that. You got to see the factors in that. We look at the Phillies, like you heard the Philly fans during the playoffs. I was doing a lot of live streams during the playoffs, and of course the World Series, right? The Phillies just claimed that they were better than the Mets and the Braves. Yeah, of course you're going to say that while you're in the World Series, but you got hot at the right time. That doesn't make you a better team than the teams that are currently in your division. That doesn't make sense, right? What happened to the Nationals after 2019? They won the World Series. Was everybody claiming in 2020, 2021, and 2022 to be champions, or to be the best team ever? No. So, if you get hot at the right time, what happened to the Kansas City Royals after 2015, right? Nobody cared about them after that. It comes down to getting hot at the right time. Like it's rare now that the best team in baseball wins the World Series. And I don't count the Astros because they were in a much inferior team, inferior league in the American League. That's an absolute joke. Look where all the free agents went. All the big free agents, guess where they went? Minus Aaron Judge. Where did they all go? They all went to the National League. So National League is far superior than the American League, right? I guarantee you, if the Astros would have faced the Braves, the Mets, the Dodgers, I think they would have had a much tougher time than facing the Phillies that got completely exposed because they weren't as good as they looked in the playoffs, because they got exposed where their biggest weakness was, which was strikeouts. And if they don't hit a home run, they don't win. We talked about that with the Braves all year. If you look how the Braves beat the Mets in the last series of the year, if they didn't hit home runs, they didn't score. That's the way it was. And that's exactly how it's going to be again, because they didn't lose strikeouts in their lineup. They got more strikeouts in their lineup. So, if you look at the strikeout totals from the Mets, Phillies, and the Braves, the Phillies and the Braves struck out. I thought I looked at it. I think I'm correct, but it could be a little less, could be a little more, but it's not much of a difference. Around 150 strikeouts more in lineups strikeouts from the Phillies and the Braves more than the Mets. And with the shift that is banned, and now it's going to take, better plays and better defensive plays to make defensive plays to get outs. The Mets put the bat on the ball consistently a lot more. And that actually worked in the Mets' favor for the majority of the year. And I think if the Mets would have pitched competently in the series against the Braves or in the playoffs, I think they would have had a shot. But they didn't. It came down to the pitching at the end. The pitching struggled in September. The pitching struggled in the playoffs. So it's very interesting to look at. You can look at it from any perspective, right? But you know what? I love to criticize my team because I am a Mets fan. I think it's stupid to criticize other teams if you can't criticize your own, right? I know there's flaws in the Mets lineup. Absolutely. We lack power. But why did we lack power? Because the people we counted on for that power, Escobar, McCann, catcher, DH, we didn't get it, right? When we look at McCann's career offensively, he was hitting 10 to 15, close to 12 to 15 home runs. So those extra 15 home runs could have made a huge difference in the lineup. But when you get 2 home runs or 3 home runs from your catcher, well, that's non-existent. DH was a disaster. I think we had 2 home runs prior to the trades at the deadline for our DH, and both of them came from J.D. Davis, right? And Vogelback, I think, provided 6 home runs, and Ruff provided 0. So in total, our DH got 8 home runs. You're not winning that way. I mean, you can only think that the Mets can have, if you get between 15 and 20 home runs, or 15 to 25 home runs from your DH spot, 20 home runs from your third base spot, and 10 home runs from your catcher, that's 40 plus home runs that is added to this lineup already that the Mets didn't have last year. I mean, just by the players that you see, right? You expect a full year of Vogelback. He hit 6 home runs, I believe, or 7 home runs in the couple of months that Vogelback was a Met. So 6 home runs. If you do that across the season, he'll have about 15 home runs or so. He averages around 17 home runs. So 17 home runs for Vogelback. I'm not even counting Ruff, but if Pham plays, that's an extra 15 home runs that you wouldn't have otherwise that we had. Right? And then Escobar, who had a terrible year but hit 20 home runs. I expect Escobar to hit 25 home runs because he's done that throughout his career. So, and if you get 10 home runs from your catcher total, that is a hell of a lot more than what you got last year. And that's a huge deal. That is 40 to 45 home runs, possibly 50 home runs added to this lineup that was lost last year. And that was with Alonso hitting 40 plus home runs and Lindor hitting 25 home runs. If Alonso, who is projected, I think he's projected to hit 39 home runs. So if he hits 39 home runs, you hear Alonso hits 20, Lindor hits 23 home runs. Well, that's very similar to last year. And you add 50 home runs from the spots that didn't hit for power at all last year. That's a huge difference in the lineup when you got 50 home runs more out of this lineup that you should have got last year that you were expecting, but you didn't get. Right? Everybody thought that, Dominic Smith could be a 15 home run guy. J.D. Davis can be a 15 home run guy. Look at J.D. Davis' stats in 2019. He had a really good season. He hit for power. That's 30 home runs from 2 DHs. And then Escobar should have hit about 5 or 6 home runs more. Catcher should have at least had about 12. That is a lot of home runs that was lost in this lineup. And, when you have Canada that can hit 13 home runs, when you got Nimmo that can hit 15 to 16 home runs, Marte can hit 16, 17 home runs. You can hit in total 100 RBI, 50 to 60 home runs more, and that's a huge difference in a lineup that consistently got on base all year. If you look at the totals on player guys that got on base throughout the entire year, the Mets were one of the best in the league. The problem that pursued later in the year, late August into early September, guess what? They weren't driving those runs home. And that's something that was frustrating because when anybody struggles, there's always a chance of them hitting it over the wall when you got power hitters, right? When Alonso's struggling, he's not going to put the bat on the ball a lot. But if he connects, he'll hit a home run, right? That's how it usually is with a lot of those guys, right? But when you don't have power hitters and you're struggling, their game is not power, and your lineup struggles, well, you're not going to bring those runs in. Even if you have high on-base percentage guys, if your guy is a 16, 17 home run guy, that's not a power bat. So when they struggle, the part of their game that they're good at, they're not doing, which is driving in runs, with singles and doubles or getting on base. They're not doing that. They're either striking out or grounding out. But power hitters are on another level. When they're struggling, there's always that threat of hitting the ball over the wall. And the Mets lost a lot of home runs that they were expecting from guys from the DH spot, from the catcher spot, from third base for the majority of the year. Because I think in September, Escobar hit 10 home runs. Like, he was that dominant. Like, just imagine he had 10 home runs in September, but if he was even average in the other months of the year, he could have had 30 home runs easily. Like, that's a lot of home runs lost from this lineup. And that's why when you talk about power bats, it's not always about the power bats. It's where you're getting that power from. And when you consistently lost that power from those three spots that we talked about consistently throughout the year, third base, catcher, and DH, if you get 40 home runs more for them three positions in total, that is a huge difference. That could have easily been over 5 runs per game in 2022. That could have made a tremendous difference on a handful of games that would have made the Mets have 104 wins maybe, right? It's a lot of ifs, but I mean, they were expecting 15 home runs from Dominic Smith, 15 from J.D. Davis, 25 from Escobar, 10 from McCann. That's almost 50 home runs that you did not get that was expected. So that's something that is always very interesting. Well, I don't think Alvarez is going to be a part of this team to start the season. I think Beatty is the option, that the best prospect that you're going to see have the best chance of making the team, because the Mets want Alvarez to be a catcher that can work with a rotation, that can work well with a rotation. He's got Navarez now that can help him with that. We know he can hit, but if you're not a good defensive catcher, or at least good enough, and you don't work well with the rotation, you're a waste of a catcher. You're a bona fide DH. And that might be nice at the moment, but we're not there yet. If Alvarez can show that he can be a decent catcher and provide the power that we all expect, because I don't think Alvarez is going to hit for average. I think he's going to be a 230 on a good year, 245 hitter. So if he don't hit 30 plus home runs, I mean, he's a bust. Let's be honest. Number one prospect in all of baseball. If you're not hitting for average, and, if he hits 260 and he hits 25, 27 home runs, all right, we can live with that as a catcher, absolutely. But if you're batting 230 and you're not hitting over 30 home runs, then you're a bust of a prospect. You're better than other catchers because catchers suck around the league. So we'll see. Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying we don't need Correa. The point is, we don't have Correa. That's it. Like, that's reality. I know, Maltman, you're still not in that reality phase of getting past Correa. We don't have Correa. But this team without Correa won 101 games. And that was without DeGrom and Scherzer for 13 weeks out of the year last year. So you can only expect that your number one and number two starters won't miss 13 weeks out of the year combined. Even if they if they miss 4 weeks combined or 5 weeks out of the year, it's 7 weeks more we would have them than we had DeGrom and Scherzer last year. So you can look at any team when it comes to injuries and health. But again, I just went on for about 15 minutes about missing 40 to 50 home runs that the Mets were expecting to get from certain parts of this lineup that they did not get at all. 2 home runs from the DH spot prior to the deadline with JD Davis and Dominic Smith. Two home runs. Where in a DH spot, you should be expected at least 15 to 20 home runs. And the Mets were nowhere near that. And then third base, basically Escobar had 10 home runs for almost the entire year until the month of September when I think he hit 9 or 10. And then catcher, what did we had? 3 home runs the entire year from catcher? You know, that's a situation where we should have had 10, 11 home runs that we were expecting. So if you add that all up, that's about 40 home runs that were missed the entire year. You know, you look at the lineup now, you got a lot of guys that can hit 15, 16 home runs all across the lineup. But if they all do that, with Alonso hitting 39 home runs and Lindor hitting 22, 23 home runs, well, you're adding about 40 home runs more to this lineup. And you already got the on-base guys that are already on-base guys that always get on base. So that 40 home runs can drive in a hell of a lot more runs than we currently had last year. So that's something that you always have to look at when you're talking about a lineup that you look. You always go through projections with players. Look last year at projections for James McCann, for Dominic Smith, or JD Davis. Each one of them were projected to have in 2022. I think Dominic Smith was having 16 home runs. JD Davis was having 14 home runs. James McCann was having about 12 home runs. Add that up. That's almost 40 home runs already. And that's not including, I think his projection was 25 home runs. So you lost almost 50 home runs in those 3 spots from 4 players that you never got. And with Tommy Pham, Vogelbach for a whole year, both of those guys can combine for about 30 home runs just on average. So that's 30 home runs that the Mets didn't have almost all year. So it's very interesting to look at, but it's also projections that we lost in 2022 that could have made a tremendous difference the entire year. That's a handful of games. You know, those 40 home runs, even if you get 10% of them that win you ball games, that's a handful of games. That's a couple of more wins that would have made a huge difference at the end of the year instead of what happened in 2022. So with that said, guys, another Mets Hot Stove Live in the books. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, guys, we're getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers. 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from position players reporting. Spring training, the end of the month, first game is February 25th on the Saturday. I'll be down there. I'll be hanging out with Hayden, who's already down there. So that's going to be fun. I believe my boy, Baseball Mike, is going to be down there as well. So we're going to have a lot of fun during those couple of days down there. I'm hoping that we can walk the spring training facility like you were able to do prior to the pandemic. I think you're allowed to do that once again. So that would be a lot of fun, and I do think it's going to be perfect. And a lot of fun. So hopefully you keep on tuning in for the spring training edition to Talking Mets at Raw. So make sure, Richard, that's awesome since 63. At least you've seen championships, buddy. I have not. So with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to another Mets Hot Stove Live right here on Talking Mets and Rob. If you missed the Pete Alonso extension video prior to the live stream, check it out. I go with 4 different proposals the Mets could offer Pete Alonso. It ranges from 7 to 9 years with different average annual value and different total money in the contract. So with that said, everybody have a great night. As always, let's go Mets. See you next time, guys. Have a good night.